Hi guys, welcome back to Mr. C's Accounting, where we are looking at preferred shares. So let's get to it. So first off, what is a preferred share? Just like the name implies, preferred shares have a preference or priority over common shares. And usually they have priority with respect to what are called dividends, which is money paid from the company to the owners of the preferred shares. They also have priority in terms of assets in the event of liquidation of the company. So first of all, liquidation means that a company it's closing down and it's converting all of its assets to cash, usually for the owners and for respective shareholders. So when assets are being sold or when money is being distributed as a result of the liquidation of the assets. Now, obviously, this varies from situation to situation, but if assets or cash from assets become available, then owners of preferred shares would have priority in terms of obtaining them. Now, other points about preferred shares, they usually do not have voting rights, which is interesting. Common shares do have voting rights, but they don't give you dividends. So when investing in stocks, you'll want to make a choice between whether you want to be able to vote in what the company does, or if you want to be able to get periodical payments, dividends. And also, don't forget, dividends are not guaranteed, and there is no set schedule, that the dividends are paid. Companies can declare a schedule, but they have no obligation to pay dividends until they openly declare them, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. They may be issued for cash or non-cash assets, just like common shares. So if you guys remember that question about, it was an example, I think it was about a lawyer and legal fees, and instead of paying the lawyer, the company gave them 1,000 common shares. I forget what the value was, but anyway, they gave them 1,000 common shares instead. You could do the exact same thing with preferred shares. And they may be reacquired, similar to common shares. That means the company buys them back. And in the shareholders' equity section, that's what S/E stands for, by the way, is shareholders' equity. In the shareholders' equity section, preferred shares are presented first. So, part of that is just, prestige, but the other part of it is that due to the nature of preferred shareholders and the nature in which dividends are paid, first to preferred shareholders and then to common shareholders, it makes sense to list the preferred shares first. Let's move on to an example. So, ABC Company issues 10,000 no par value preferred shares for $12 cash per share. So the entry for that is going to look exactly the same as it would for common shares, except we write preferred shares in the entry. Pretty straightforward. Note that if preferred shares have a stated value, any excess proceeds would be recorded in a separate contributed capital in excess of stated value account. This is the exact same procedure that you would take if you were dealing with common shares. If you remember from last week's lesson, if common shares are sold or are issued above their stated value, then we have the credit entry for common shares for whatever the value is, and then another entry with contributed capital in excess of stated value for whatever the difference between the stated value and the issued value is. And I think, we're moving on. So dividend preference. Common shareholders will not receive any dividends in the current year until preferred shareholders have fully received their dividends. So that's another thing to remember when when you ever choose to buy common shares. Just because you buy common shares does not mean that you will never get dividends. Companies declare dividends when they're doing well, when they're making lots of profits. And when that happens, they can pass on dividends to common shareholders. They just need to make sure that the dividends go to the preferred shareholders first. And this sort of claim on dividends is called first claim. So it's a pretty logical name. Keep in mind, however, that a first claim does not mean that dividends are guaranteed. Oh yeah, and we talked about this already. Dividends are never guaranteed until the company declares them. And even then, they're not guaranteed. If something happens to the company and it goes bust, it may not be able to pay those dividends. But it's as close as a guarantee as you can get. So yeah, it simply means that preferred shareholders must be paid a full dividend before common shareholders get anything. In terms of how dividends are stated, they're usually stated as a specific dollar amount per share, or as a percentage of the stated value. And then, yeah, you just multiply the percent of the stated value by the dollar amount to get whatever the dividend amount is. All right, so moving on to cumulative dividend and dividends in arrears. I think that's how you say that. I'm not sure. Arrears. Cumulative feature on preferred shares means that the preferred shareholders must be paid both the current year dividend and any unpaid prior year dividends before common shareholders receive any dividends. So again, it's about having priority. Dividends not declared in a year for preferred shareholders are called dividends in arrears. So remember earlier how I said that there's no guarantee of when a company will issue dividends, and they're not legally required to pay them out until they declare them. So if they don't declare dividends in a year, then that's called dividends in arrears. Note that there is no obligation for a company to pay dividends until the dividend is declared by the board of directors. I think I said that already, but it's a good thing to note, especially when you're considering buying preferred shares. They're not obligated to pay anything until they declare it. All right, so let's look at another example with our ABC company. So ABC's company, or ABC company's $10,000 no par value preferred shares have a $3.50 cumulative dividend. Dividends are 2 years in arrears. So, step 1, calculate total dividends in arrears. So this is dividends for other years that they were not declared in. So total dividends in arrears equals 10,000 shares times $3.50 times 2 years. So this will give us the total dividend amount in arrears for the whole time that it has been in arrears. It's so weird to say. Anyway, so it's $70,000. Step 2 is calculate current year dividends. So just for the current year, it's $10,000 times $3.50. And that's $35,000. Step 3 is add the two together. So total preferred dividends is equal to all the dividends in arrears plus the current dividends. And that equals $105,000. So when dividends are declared, the total amount will be this for all of the shares, for the 10,000 shares. After those 2 years, including the year that it was declared for, so 3 years total. Notes, dividends in arrears, that's so weird to say, are not a liability. No obligation exists to shareholders until a dividend is declared by the board. So, again, they're not liable to pay anything until they say they will pay something. The convertible feature provides the opportunity for preferred shareholders to convert their preferred shares into common shares. the reasons to do this are varied. Sometimes they may want the vote. Usually, though, it's because they can upgrade how much capital they have, or how much, not so much how much capital, but how much the value of their investment can be upgraded. So going back to our ABC company, if they issue 1,000 no par value convertible preferred shares at $100 per share, one preferred share is convertible into 10 shares of no par value common share. So you're turning one preferred share into 10 shares of no par value common shares. All these words being put together are getting difficult to say. Common shares have a current marketplace of $9 a share. I guess the question is, should you do it? No, you should not. Why? Why? Because you would be exchanging preferred shares worth $100,000, so $100 per share times 1,000 shares. This is the preferred share value, by the way, for common shares worth $90,000, i.e. 9 times 1,000 times 10. So even though you're getting more common shares, you're getting less value, and therefore, no, you should not do it. Not to mention the common shares are less likely to pay out dividends. But continuing onwards, the market value of the preferred shares has increased to $101 per share. And market value of the common shares has increased to $12 a share. One preferred share is convertible into 10 shares of no par value common shares. Would you exchange at this point? Yes, yes, yes. And the reason is comparing value, or total value, of the preferred shares. We have $101,000 worth of preferred shares for common shares worth $120,000. And we got there $12 a share times 1,000 shares times 10, because each preferred share is worth 10 common shares, which gives you $120,000. So in this case, financially speaking at least, it is profitable and worth it to make the conversion. Now, whether you do make the conversion, depends on whether you're okay with not getting dividends and stuff like that. But anyway, how would this be recorded by the corporation? So we would debit preferred shares for $100,000, and we would credit common shares for $100,000. So debit shares go down, common shares go up. Now this probably seems counterintuitive. It certainly did to me. And the reason why it's recorded like this, and the reason why we don't say anything about the $120,000, is because the company has deemed this to be an equal trade. And as a result of that, in the company's eyes, there's been no transfer of value. Or rather, there's been a transfer, but I mean, there's been no gain or loss in value from the company's point of view. From the customer's point of view, or from the shareholder's point of view, I guess I should say, there is a perceived increase in value. But from the company's point of view, since they've deemed this to be an equal transfer, there is no change in value. And therefore, there is no gain or loss in the company. I hope that makes sense. I don't think I said it all that well, but the company has not received any new assets in this transaction, and therefore we record the initial value of the preferred shares in this case, and we just transfer that amount into the common shares, even though from the shareholder's point of view the value has changed. From the company's point of view, the value has not changed. And since we're bookkeeping we're bookkeeping for the company, we record it as such. Lots of stuttering today. I don't know why. But anyway, let's press forwards. Redeemable. I think we talked about this already. I think I mentioned this at the start of the video. But redeemable shares are ones that the corporation can buy back from preferred shareholders. I don't believe this is available to common shareholders. But yeah, so it's just a feature that can be tacked on to preferred shares. There's nothing overly significant about it. Retractable is a feature that allows preferred shareholders to sell their shares back to the company. And so that's just, I suppose it's an added layer of security for people who are easily susceptible to buyer's remorse. If you don't know what that is, by the way, if you ever bought something and then you feel really guilty about it, like 10 minutes after the fact, and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have bought this. That's called buyer's remorse. It's a marketing phenomenon. But anyway, a feature like retractable shares can help insulate against that, because if you feel like you made a bad decision, you can sell the shares back to the company. So that's nice. And that is it. Okay, we stumbled a little bit, but we got through it. That's preferred shares. So I hope you found this video informative, and I will see you in the next one. All right, see ya.